Welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast, the podcast for moms who know that when they take care of themselves, they can take better care of everyone else. Today's podcast is sponsored by my program, Self-Care Morning Routine. Now, this program is a mini course designed to help you set up a morning routine, get in self-care every single day, and really set up your days right. It has really practical, useful tips, and you can go through it pretty quick and pretty quickly have yourself a morning routine that works for you. So to check that out, go to momswhoknowpodcast.com and it's right there on the front page. Now today's podcast is me. I don't have a guest today, and I'm going to be telling you about a little guy that I love so much, and he is my Carter. So we're coming up here on Carter's second birthday, and I've just been wanting to share the experience that I've had with him and talk a little bit about what that's been like. So if you've been around for a while, you know that we have 4 kids who are a little bit older than Carter, and we thought 4 kids was just a really great number of kids. That was where we wanted to stay. My family loves babies and would always ask, "Are you going to have another one? Are you going to have another one?" And I'd say, "No, we're good. 4 is great. We like having 4." Our kids at one point really wanted another baby, and they asked us if we would have another baby, and I told my daughter, the next person to have a baby in this family is you. You're going to have a baby before I ever have another baby. Well, as time went on, what happened was one day I was just starting to feel really kind of nauseous, and I was late to start my period, and I thought I couldn't be pregnant, but that's just kind of weird, but I'm not pregnant. But my daughter came home from school. It was just the 2 of us home. And I said, "Let's go down to Rite Aid." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I just want to get a pregnancy test." And she said, "Are you kidding, Mom? You want to get a pregnancy test? What? Are you pregnant?" And I said, "No, I'm not pregnant. I'm definitely not pregnant. But let's just go get a pregnancy test to make sure I'm not pregnant." So the 2 of us went down. We got a pregnancy test. I took it, and it said that I was pregnant. I showed her, I didn't say anything, and I just showed her, and she said, "Mom, you're pregnant?" She was about 12 at the time. She would have been 12. And I couldn't even answer her. I couldn't say anything. I just really had to try to process this information because I was honestly taking that test to just make sure that I wasn't pregnant because I kind of already knew I wasn't pregnant. So then the boys came home. 3 boys came home from school, and we told them that we were going to have a baby. And all the kids were just super excited, couldn't believe it. So we decided to make a scavenger hunt for James, for their dad. And so we made little clues all around the house and led him from place to place. And as he was doing this scavenger hunt, he kept giving me looks like, "What? What are we doing? You know, just is something up?" And I tried not to let him know. And when we got to the last clue, it was in our bathroom, and the last clue had a big poster of kind of like a stick figure, a pregnant stick figure that we had found online. And it said, "We're going to have a baby." And he looked at it and he just fell to his knees. He didn't say anything. He was so shocked and so surprised. And I think that we could definitely say this pregnancy was an unexpected pregnancy for us. And I never felt sad, but I definitely felt shocked and surprised. So that was the first thing for us, was getting over this surprise. Now, babies are always a joy, right? Like, it's wonderful to bring this new life into the world. But I do know that a lot of people, when they're not expecting a pregnancy, can really struggle with that. I'm grateful for me. This wasn't a struggle. And honestly, I kind of thought that it would have been. So a few weeks before we found out we were pregnant, we had gone out to dinner with some friends, and they had a little baby, and they brought him with, and we're sitting there eating dinner, and of course, right when the food comes out, the baby's fussy, and they're taking turns trying to juggle this baby and eat. And I remember talking to James and just saying, "Aren't you glad we're done with that phase? We can just eat our dinner when it's hot." And that we don't have a baby and isn't this nice kind of thing. But little did we know, a few weeks after that, we would find out that we were going to have our own little dinner interrupter. I was really sick with this pregnancy. In my previous pregnancies, I'd had a little bit of morning sickness, but nothing major. With this pregnancy, I was down and out. I was so sick that a lot of days I couldn't function and I just laid in bed. The doctor gave me medicine. It's like Unisom and vitamin B6. And what that does, if you haven't experienced that, it takes away the nausea by making you sleep all day. And some days that was worth it to me, and that's what I wanted to do. And some days I had to just get through it. Looking at food, shopping for food, all of it would make me really sick. And so luckily that only lasted for about the first 3 months, about the first trimester. And then I felt much better and things got kind of back to normal. My kids helped out a lot during that phase, and my husband and everyone stepped up and helped, and I was really grateful to have older kids that could help me, and they learned how to make dinner and took care of a lot of things around the house. But other than feeling sick at the beginning, really it was a pretty good pregnancy. Now, one day at about probably, I don't know, 34, 35 weeks along, I just had this feeling come over me that I was going to lose this baby. I thought that I was going to have him for a while and then I wouldn't have him anymore. And everything had been fine, and he was measuring fine and checking out fine. So it was kind of weird that I had this feeling at all, but I just thought he's going to be with us for a while, but he might not make it. And I told James that, and he thought that was weird. Why am I feeling that? And then later that day that I told him, we got a phone call from the doctor, and they said, your baby's measuring really small, and we want you to come in and get monitored 3 times a week. And unfortunately, our doctor, where they needed to do it, was 40 minutes away. So 3 times a week, I had to make this trek 40 minutes away and be hooked up to these monitors so they could monitor the amniotic fluid, they could monitor his heart rate, they could monitor if there was stress on the baby, and they could monitor his growth also. Now, when they asked me to come in, they were concerned because he was in the 11th percentile for weight for his gestational period, whatever, his gestational age. But if babies are 10th percentile or lower, they'll call you in. And he was 11th, so he was right on the border, but his abdomen was measuring small, which if you're like me, you might think, well, does that mean, something internally is wrong? They said, no, it's just he's measuring small on the abdomen, and that measurement is what caused them to have him come in. So I went to appointment after appointment, and he checked out. He did fine at all those appointments, and everything was fine. But they did have me meet with a specialist, an OBGYN specialist who specialized in, special cases, babies that are having a hard time. And after 3 weeks of this monitoring, almost 3 weeks, I went into her and she measured him again. And he measured exactly the same as he had 3 weeks previous. So he hadn't grown in that whole time. And of course, during that last month of pregnancy, babies are growing a lot. That's what they're doing in there. They've pretty much formed all their organs and everything's formed, and they're just growing. So he was tiny and he wasn't growing. And so she said, we need to get this baby out because he's not growing. And if he doesn't get out soon, then he's not going to make it. And so that day she stripped my membranes. Painful, by the way, if any of you have ever done that. And he was in the 4th percentile for weight at this point. And a very tiny little guy. And so she stripped my membranes, and that sent me into labor. I'll tell you a little bit about my birth and labor experience. So my other babies had come fairly quickly, And so I knew I was going to have a fast labor, and this doctor's office is 40 minutes away. So when I did find myself going into labor and I was having contractions, I said, okay, let's go. It's time, let's go. So we went down to the hospital, and I was dilated to a 4. And they said, or maybe it was a 3, but either way, they said, oh, you're not progressing fast enough, and we're going to send you home. And I said, no, I'm going to have this baby really fast. You've got to keep me. And they said, no. So we left the hospital, drove the 40 minutes home. I took a bath. I laid in bed. When I was done with my bath, Carter kicked me as I was having a contraction. My water broke everywhere, and I got James up and said, let's go right now. I'm going to have this baby. The contractions were intense after that. I was having them very quickly on the drive there. James was driving really fast, and we got to the hospital, and I remember one of the nurses said, if you're dilated far enough, if you're far enough along, do you want to do this without an epidural? And I said, nope, I just want to have an epidural. This is painful. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. I want an epidural. And so they put in the order for the anesthesiologist to come in and give me an epidural. And he was like that guy on Zootopia, the sloths, if you have seen that movie. He slowly made his way in. And then once he was in there, I had a really huge contraction. And so they checked me again. And they said, you're at a 10. It's too late. You can't have an epidural. And I was pretty upset because I had wanted an epidural. But I pushed that baby out with no pain medication whatsoever, and I felt pretty proud of myself, I'll say, looking back. That was pretty intense. If I had the choice, I would have had an epidural. I did with my other 4, but there is definitely something powerful that comes out when you do natural childbirth. Carter was born 4 pounds, 15 ounces, the tiniest little baby I've ever held in my life. He was just tiny and perfect and so precious, so sweet. And a lot of times, I should mention, he was born at 36 weeks and 6 days. So if he had been at 37 weeks, they would have considered him not a preemie, but he was a preemie by 1 day. And because he was so tiny, they expected that he would need to be in the NICU, that he would need a lot of help, but he didn't. Everything was perfect and healthy, and he was fine. It was amazing. We brought him home the next day, this tiny little baby that his preemie clothes were just swimming on him. So we brought him home, and things were good. I was nursing, and the first couple of days, things seemed to be going pretty well. But at about 6 days old, I noticed he wasn't latching on to nurse, to breastfeed. And I would try to feed him, and he just wasn't interested. And I really felt like he was giving up, that he didn't want to nurse, that he couldn't, that he didn't have the energy to. I would try to nurse him, and he would cry a little and just fall asleep. And that night, I remember I was up with him trying to feed him, and he wouldn't nurse, and I was just crying and pleading with him and with God to just try to keep him, to have him stay with me, stay. And I wasn't sure that he was going to, because I had had that feeling before he was born, and because I could see this giving up in him, I was really scared. And the next morning, James took off work, and we both went to the doctor again. And the doctor measured him. He was weighing only 4 pounds, 4 ounces at that point. He had lost a lot of weight because he wasn't getting enough food. And he was dehydrated. And the doctor said, okay, we might need to put him in the hospital, and we might need to hook him up to IVs and get him more nutrition. But luckily, they instead sent us to the lactation specialist, and she said that he wasn't able to latch on because I was too big. no one ever told me that before, but anyway, so she said he was just so tiny, and come to find out that wasn't even the issue. He had a little tongue tie, and once, I'm getting ahead of myself, but later on, once that was clipped, he was able to nurse fine, so it wasn't a size issue. But anyway, she said if I pumped, then he would be able to eat. So I pumped right there in the lactation office and fed him a bottle, and he drank the whole thing, and we were just so happy, and he kept drinking. I pumped, he drank, he was eating. It was wonderful. And the next day, we brought him back, and he had gained a few ounces, and the doctor said, he's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. It's all okay. And so I was so just relieved and happy and grateful about all that. So during this process, I hadn't been producing quite enough milk because, of course, you produce for the need, and he hadn't been drinking a lot. So I was trying to pump, but I didn't have my supply all the way up and ready. And so my good friend was, in fact, the one that I mentioned earlier that we had been out to dinner with, she was still nursing her baby. And I asked her if she could give some milk, if she could pump some milk for my little Carter. And she did, and I expected it to be a one-time thing. He was so little, and I know people feed formula, and it's fine, and it all works out, but I just wanted this baby to have breast milk so bad, and my friend knew that I wanted that, and so she pumped milk for me. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. This went on for about a week, and she lived about probably half a mile away, and she would pump and then drive it up and bring it to me and swap out the empties for fulls, and just one of the sweetest acts of service that I have received, because it was so meaningful to me, because I needed that. I felt like I needed that for my baby. Another really great thing that happened with the bottle feeding is, with all my other babies since I breastfed, it was me getting up in the night. But with our little Carter, James got to help and get up in the night too. And of course that was hard for him going to work and everything, but it really helped the two of them to bond much quicker. He's close with all our kids, but he got to have that sweet experience of being up with the baby and serving and loving on him in the middle of the night. So that was another really sweet thing that came from nursing this baby. From not nursing this baby, let me say that right, that from bottle feeding this baby. Now, after he had the tongue tie clipped, he was able to nurse just fine. That was probably at about 3 or 4 months old. I can't remember now. And he has been totally healthy and well and happy ever since. This little guy has brought so much joy to our family, and I really believe that God sent him to us when he did for a reason. Now, I remember after we had our first 4 kids, I thought, okay, if we are supposed to have another baby, I want him now, or her. I want this baby now. I don't want to have a caboose later on down the road. I just thought, that doesn't seem like a good idea. We'll be so out of the baby stage. And it wasn't what I pictured. But it was definitely right for our family. This has been amazing. Definitely my best baby experience. And that's not because I love him more or he's my favorite. In case any of my other kids listen to this, he's not. They're all my favorites. But having so much help and so many other people who love our baby, who can help with him and take care of him, it's almost like we're all raising him together, because there's a 7-year gap between him and the next oldest. So he has, right now, Carter's almost 2, and the other kids are 15, 13, 10, and 8. We have a lot of helpers around here, and it's awesome. So the purpose for my telling you this story is, one, just because it's something I've been reflecting on lately and thinking about his life and how grateful I am to have him in my life. And also to maybe help you start thinking that our plans aren't always the best plans. And sometimes when something that we don't expect comes along, it might be just the best thing for us, and it might be part of a greater plan. And I know that that's been true for our family with our little Carter. I hope that this has been interesting for you, and I appreciate you listening and being here on Moms Who Know. For show notes, as always, you can visit momswhoknowpodcast.com, and I will see you next week.